In a small, forgotten town, a 17-year-old boy, cold and exhausted, was racing the clock to deliver one final package, the only thing standing between him and losing the last roof over his head. But on that freezing sidewalk, he saw an old woman, alone, lost, ignored by everyone who passed. And in that moment, he made a choice that would cost him everything. What he didn't know was who she really was or how that one act of kindness was about to rewrite his entire life. Welcome to Grateful Stories, where tales of compassion and kindness are told. Let's uncover what really happened. The wind had teeth that evening. It slipped through coat sleeves, bit at the tips of fingers, and whistled through the quiet streets of Maple Hollow like a warning no one listened to. It was early winter in a town that didn't rush for anything. The sun had dipped early, casting the sidewalks in soft gray, and the street lights hadn't quite made up their minds whether to flicker on or stay dark. Eli Turner pedaled hard down Oak Ridge Avenue, his breath showing in quick bursts. His jeans were too thin for the cold, his hoodie zipped all the way up, and the fingers clutching his handlebars were raw from the wind. He was 17, thin from more than just growth, and riding the same beat-up bike his mother had once used to get to work back before the cancer took her. And the world went quiet. The bike had rust on the pedals, a bent-back rack, and a squeaky chain Eli tightened every 3 days. It wasn't much, but it was all he had. Slung over his shoulder was a faded blue delivery bag, half-zipped. Inside, a paper-wrapped parcel, the last delivery of the day. If he made it before 8 o'clock, he'd scrape together just enough to pay for one more week at the rundown boarding house where he rented a room the size of a closet. If he didn't, the landlord had made it clear no payment, no key. Eli didn't have a safety net. He didn't have a plan B, only the ticking of the town clock behind him, the ache in his knees, and the soft hope that if he just kept pedaling, life might give him one more day of mercy. He rounded the corner of Maple and 3rd, dodging a pothole he knew by instinct, and started toward the old bus stop near the edge of town. That's when he saw her. She stood under the flickering street lamp like something out of a forgotten memory. An old woman, beige wool coat, knit hat pulled tight over silver hair, leather purse clutched tightly to her chest. She was murmuring to herself, turning in slow circles, looking up and down the road like someone waiting for a bus that wasn't coming. Eli slowed instinctively, his breath caught in his chest. Cars passed her. No one stopped. A couple walked by on the other side of the street, heads down, shoulders hunched, avoiding her completely. Even the town's rhythm, usually slow, usually kind, seemed to have left her behind. Eli rolled past. Just a few feet, then stopped. He looked at the old woman again, how she kept stepping forward toward the curb, only to shuffle back like the world didn't line up with her anymore. He checked the time on his watch, 7:41 p.m., 19 minutes left. If he kept going, he'd make it, just barely. A warm room, a locked door, a roof for one more week. But something held him there. The wind shifted just then, carrying her voice toward him. Bus number 12. Willow. Or was it Oak Ridge? Oh, I'm sure this was the stop. Eli turned. She wasn't talking to anyone in particular, just to the air, like her words might keep her rooted in a world slipping away. He looked at his delivery bag, then back at her, and without knowing why, he swung one leg off the bike and started walking toward her. "Excuse me, Ma'am," he said gently, careful not to startle her. "You okay out here?" She blinked. It took her a second to register him. Then she smiled, soft and distant. "I was trying to get home," she said, "but I think I missed the bus. Or maybe the bus missed me." Her voice cracked like thin ice. Eli looked around. There were no other buses coming. No drivers in sight, just wind, frost, and one small figure shivering on the curb. "Do you know your address?" he asked. She looked down at her purse, fumbled with the zipper. Out came tissues, coins, a faded lipstick with no cap, but no address. Nothing useful. Just when Eli was about to give up, he noticed something glint around her neck. A pendant, oval, silver. He leaned closer, trying not to invade. There on the back, tiny cursive letters, etched in delicate script, Evelyn Rosewood, 48 Oak Hill, Drive. His stomach dropped. Oak Hill Drive was almost 2 hours away by bike, and the road to get there, mostly uphill. He could already feel the ache forming in his legs just thinking about it. But then he looked back at her. Evelyn. The way she looked at him, like she had no one else to ask, like she didn't expect him to stay. And he knew, if he left her now, she'd still be standing there when the last bus passed, still waiting for something that wasn't coming. He closed his eyes for a second. The boarding house was gone now. He could feel it. He exhaled, looked up, and forced a smile. "Well, Miss he said, lifting the back rack of his bike. "It's a long way, but I think we can make it." She looked at him, unsure. Then slowly, carefully, she nodded. Eli took off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. He tied his scarf around the back seat to make it softer, helped her climb up gently, one slow step at a time. Then he grabbed the handlebars, braced himself, and said, "Hold on tight, Ms. Rosewood." She chuckled, soft and fragile. "You remind me of my grandson," she said. "Always scuffed shoes, always proud." Eli didn't answer. He just nodded and started pedaling into the dark, into the cold, into a choice that would change both their lives. But in that moment, all he knew was this: some people are put in your path for a reason. And sometimes, even if the world says you don't have time to stop, you stop anyway, because no one else will. The town faded behind them. Maple Hollow's last porch light blinked out in the rear view of Eli's mind as he leaned forward, putting his weight into the pedals. Says. Evelyn Rosewood sat quietly behind him, both hands gripping the sides of the old bike's rack. She didn't weigh much, just a small frame wrapped in Eli's coat, but the wind made it feel like he was pulling a trailer full of bricks uphill. The road curved north, narrow and cracked, framed by bare trees whispering in the wind, and the night got colder. Every mile, Eli felt it more. His fingers were numb, his hoodie soaked through, his legs burned from the strain. But he didn't stop. Every time he glanced back, he saw her tucked in, eyes half closed, her breath misting into the cold night air. She never complained, and that made Eli pedal harder. After half an hour, the first hill came. It stretched like a challenge before him, long, steep, silent. He didn't say a word, just stood on the pedals and pushed. The back wheel slipped once. He nearly lost balance. But Miss Rosewood didn't panic. She just tightened her grip and whispered, "Careful, sweetheart, sweetheart." It made something whist in Eli's chest. No one had called him that since his mother. They reached the top after 10 minutes of grinding silence. At the crest, Eli stopped. His lungs were on fire. He dropped one foot to the ground, hunching over the handlebars as he gasped. Ms. Rosewood patted his shoulder gently. "You don't have to do this. You know," she said softly. "I've lived a long life. You don't owe me anything." Eli wiped his forehead with the back of his hand, then stood upright. "I know," he said. "Steady now. That's why I'm doing it." They rode on. Halfway there, the back tire started squeaking, then wobbling. Eli gritted his teeth. Not now. He pulled over near a roadside gas station, the only one open for miles. Miss Rosewood slid off carefully, steadying herself with a hand on his shoulder. Eli knelt beside the wheel, inspecting it under the flickering lights of the awning. The rim had bent slightly, probably from the hill. He couldn't fix it, but he could nurse it a little farther. Inside the gas station, warm yellow light spilled from behind foggy windows. "Wait here," he told her. "I'll be right back." She looked up at him, eyebrows raised. "You're not buying me candy, are you?" He smiled, despite the cold. "No, ma'am. Something better." Eli stepped into the station. The heat hit him like a wall. It smelled of stale coffee and rubber mats. He walked to the counter, counting out his coins, everything he had left. One tea, extra hot, small. He watched the old man behind the counter fill the cup, lit it, and slide it across. Eli cradled it like gold. Outside, Ms. Rosewood was shivering. He held the cup out. She looked surprised. For me, he nodded. You need it more. She accepted it slowly, warming her hands on the sides. You're a good boy. Eli. He froze. He never told her his name. She sipped the tea. You said it. Back at the stop. When you were helping me on the bike. I didn't forget. He nodded slowly, unsure what to say. They sat together on the station's curb for a while, just two shadows in the cold. She spoke again, voice low, distant. I used to come this way every spring, she said. My husband would drive, and I'd make a game of naming the trees that hadn't bloomed yet. Eli glanced over. She was staring at the empty branches across the road. He passed 10 years ago, she added, quieter now. Then my son moved to Seattle. Haven't seen him in years. She looked down at her tea. I get confused sometimes. Not always, just sometimes the map in my head gets blurry. Eli didn't answer. He didn't have the words, so he just sat beside her, still, listening. When she finished the tea, she handed him the empty cup. I think I remember now, she whispered. Past the two hills, left at the stone gate, Oak Hill Drive, number 48. Big white house, black shutters. Eli helped her back onto the bike. They rode the last miles in silence. By the time they reached Oak Hill, the moon had vanished behind clouds. The trees lining the road swayed like slow dancers in the dark. Then, finally, at the end of a long gravel driveway, an iron gate, whitewashed, chipped paint, still beautiful. Past the gate, a house that looked like it belonged in a magazine. 3 stories, wraparound porch, tall columns, lights glowing faintly in the upper windows. Eli stopped the bike. Miss Rosewood stared at the house. She didn't speak. She didn't move. Then, softly, she whispered. Home. Eli helped her down. She took one shaky step forward, then another. The porch light flicked on. A figure appeared at the door, a man in his 60s, wearing a robe, slippers, and the look of someone who hadn't slept all night. Miss Evelyn, he called out, voice trembling. Good Lord, where have you been? She smiled. Out for a ride. The man rushed down the steps, wrapping her in a tight embrace. We've been calling hospitals. Police. I was about to. I'm fine, Thomas, she said gently. This young man brought me back. Thomas turned to Eli. His eyes scanned the boy, his soaked clothes, chapped hands, and tired eyes. Thank you, he said, voice thick with emotion. Please, come in. Get warm. We'll call a driver. You can stay the night. Eli shook his head. Can't. I've got to go. At least take a coat. Something warm. Shoes, those are soaked through. But Eli was already backing away. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a torn delivery receipt, scribbled something on the back. Just in case, he said, handing it to Evelyn. She took it, read it, then looked up at him, eyes soft and wet. You remind me of someone I love, she whispered, then leaned in and kissed him gently on the cheek. Eli didn't speak. He just nodded once, turned, and pedaled back into the dark. His legs ached. His lungs burned. The road home was quiet, colder than before, but something inside him felt warm. And as the mansion lights faded behind him, Eli didn't know what would happen next. He just knew he had done the right thing, even if it cost him everything. By the time Eli made it back into town, the streetlights were flickering off. The sky had turned a pale gray, hinting at snow, but not quite brave enough to fall. His breath came in slow clouds now, steady and heavy, each exhale laced with exhaustion. He coasted down the final block to the boarding house, his knees like fire, hands barely gripping the handlebars. The building loomed ahead narrow, peeling paint. One shutter half hanging from the second-floor window. Eli's bike crunched over gravel as he rolled into the driveway. He reached into his hoodie pocket for the key. Nothing. He checked again. Other pocket. Bag zipper. Back jeans pocket. Still nothing. His heart skipped. He dropped the bike, crouched beside it, rummaging through every inch of his delivery satchel, every fold in his jacket. But the key wasn't there. Then he saw it. A plastic grocery bag, left on the front porch step. Inside a pair of rolled-up socks, a cracked phone charger, a t-shirt, and a balled-up hoodie. His belongings. What little he owned in the world. Taped to the front door a white note in thick black marker. Past due. Locks changed. Eli didn't move. For a long moment he just stood there, staring at the door. Bike beside him, fingers frozen, eyes burning, no warning, no grace period, just gone. He sat on the top step, arms wrapped around his legs, trying to breathe through the silence. But the cold didn't wait. It crept under his sleeves, into his shoes, down his spine, and Eli knew he couldn't stay here. He grabbed the plastic bag, slung the satchel over his shoulder, and wheeled his bike back down the street. It was nearly 10 a.m. by the time he reached the alley behind Johnson's Market, a small brick building with dusty windows and a hand-painted fresh produce sign out front. Inside, it always smelled like oranges and old floor wax. Eli parked the bike behind the dumpster, knocked once on the side door, and waited. A few seconds passed, then the door opened with a low creak. Mr. Johnson stood there in a heavy plaid robe, coffee mug in hand. He took one look at Eli, soaked, shivering, eyes red and sighed through his nose. Didn't make rent. Huh. Eli didn't speak, just nodded. The old man stepped aside. Storeroom's dry, cots still in the corner. Don't touch the wine crates, and don't freeze to death. Eli whispered, "Thank you," and stepped in. The storeroom was dim, filled with boxes of canned goods and stacks of fruit crates. The radiator groaned in the corner like it hadn't slept in years. He curled onto the kind, pulled the scratchy blanket over his shoulders, and closed his eyes. He didn't dream, didn't cry, just rested. For the first time in weeks, he wasn't afraid to sleep. 30 miles away, in a sunlit study with tall windows and shelves lined with leather-bound books, Evelyn Rosewood stood with a piece of torn paper in her hand. It was creased, slightly smudged, written in hurried blue ink. A phone number, no name, no explanation, just a number. She held it delicately, like something sacred. Next to her, Thomas the house manager watched in quiet concern. He left it before he rode off. Evelyn whispered, "I barely noticed." She looked up. "I want to find him." Thomas blinked. "You mean the boy from last night?" She nodded slowly. "He brought me home. Thomas, not just to this house, but to myself." He hesitated. He didn't leave a name, no address. "But he gave me this," she said, lifting the paper. "And I remember his face." She walked to the window, sunlight brushing the edge of her shawl. "People like him don't show up by accident." Thomas understood. He always did. "I'll make a few calls," he said, already reaching for his phone. Back in Maple Hollow, the day passed slowly. Eli helped Mr. Johnson restock the juice fridge and sweep the storeroom floor. It wasn't much, but it kept his hands moving and his mind distracted. By dusk, he was sitting on an overturned crate near the back door, sipping lukewarm tea and staring out at the narrow strip of sky between the alley walls. That's when he heard it, the low hum of an engine, not the rusty pickup sound he was used to, something quieter, smoother. He turned his head just as a sleek black sedan pulled up to the curb behind the market. It didn't belong there, not in this part of town. The back door opened. A tall man in a pressed overcoat stepped out, glanced at a note in his hand, then up at the building. His eyes scanned the alley, then landed on Eli. He walked forward slowly, each step deliberate. "Excuse me," he said. "Are you Eli Turner?" Eli stiffened. He stood instinctively, unsure whether to run or answer. "Who's asking?" The man offered a small, calm smile. "My name's Charles. I work for Ms. Evelyn Rosewood." Eli blinked. He hadn't heard that name since. "She remembers you," Charles continued. "She remembers everything, and she asked me to find you." Eli didn't move. He wasn't used to being remembered. Not by anyone, but Charles reached into his coat and held out the torn receipt. Eli's handwriting still visible. She kept this, he said gently. Would you come with me? Eli looked on past him. At the car. Polished. Warm. Out of place in a world like his. He glanced down at his hands. Cracked knuckles. Dirt under his nails. And then up again. He swallowed. Okay, he said quietly. Charles opened the door, and for the first time in days, Eli Turner stepped into something he never expected a second chance, wrapped in kindness, waiting in the backseat of a car he didn't believe he deserved. The ride to Oak Hill felt like a dream Eli didn't dare wake from. The car was silent except for the soft hum of tires on pavement. Outside, the world slipped past bare trees, stone fences, lonely lampposts while inside. The warmth from the vents soaked slowly into Eli's frozen fingers. Charles didn't speak much. He didn't have to. When they pulled into the long gravel driveway, the gate opened without a sound, and the mansion came into view, its columns glowing softly in the porch lights. This time, Eli wasn't just passing by. He was being welcomed in. Charles led him through the wide entryway, past framed oil paintings and warm, polished floors, into a sitting room filled with books and the scent of vanilla tea. And there, standing by the fireplace, was Evelyn Rosewood. She wore a cream-colored cardigan and soft wool slippers. But it wasn't the clothes that made Eli stop. It was her eyes. Clear now. Steady. No longer lost. Hello again, she said, voice warm. You made it. Eli gave a small nod. You remembered. I never forgot, she replied. She motioned for him to sit by the fire. A second cup of tea was already waiting on the side table. I hope this isn't too strange, she said gently, but I'd like to offer you a place to stay, just until you figure out your next steps. Eli blinked. A place. Here, a real room. She smiled. Not a cot, not a floor, with a bed and a desk and heat. He opened his mouth to speak but couldn't find the words. Evelyn leaned in. You don't owe me anything. Eli. But you gave me something I didn't even know I'd lost dignity. When I was standing at that bus stop, people walked by like I didn't exist. You stopped, and you saw me. She paused, her voice growing quieter. Now, I'd like to see you grow, if that's something you still want. Eli looked down at the teacup in his hands. His fingers were still trembling. I never finished school, he said. Didn't have time or money. Evelyn nodded. Well, we can fix both. She stood, walked to a nearby cabinet, and pulled out a folder. Inside were documents, applications, a plan, and at the very bottom, handwritten in looping script, Oak Hill Kindness Fund, in honor of where it all began. I've been thinking a lot these past few days, she said, about how many people are out there like you. Good hearts. Just stuck. She looked at him. I want to help them, and I want you to help me do it. Eli's brow furrowed. What do you mean I want you to help run it? The fund, the outreach, everything? She smiled gently. You already know how to recognize people falling through the cracks. I can't teach that. He stared at her. No one had ever said something like that to him before. Not just you deserve help, but you matter. You have something to offer. The next weeks passed like pages turning. Eli moved into a second-floor bedroom with tall windows and bookshelves built into the wall. He chose the desk near the light and placed his mother's old bike helmet on top like a reminder of how far he'd come. He started attending night classes through a community scholarship Evelyn helped fund, history, ethics, nonprofit management. In the mornings, he worked in the west wing of the house now converted into the Oak Hill Kindness Fund office. His job wasn't glamorous. Phone calls, filing, drafting outreach letters. But every task carried weight because the letters were real. The people were real. There was a boy in Alabama who slept behind a diner, a mother of two in Idaho who worked 3 jobs and still couldn't afford school books, a veteran in Ohio who'd been living out of his truck all winter. Eli read each story with a quiet kind of reverence. He wrote back, sent blankets, made calls, And slowly, he became part of something bigger. Spring came slowly to Maple Hollow. The snow melted into puddles. The trees bloomed late, and the town yawned back to life. One bright Saturday, Eli pedaled through downtown on a newer bike, still modest, but solid. He wore a canvas messenger bag over his shoulder and a soft gray sweater Evelyn had insisted he take. As he passed the bus stop on Maple and 3rd, he slowed. It was empty now. No passengers, no cars rushing by, just the wind and the quiet hum of memory. Eli stopped, resting one foot on the pavement. He looked at the curb, then at the bench, then at the place where a woman once stood, confused, forgotten, waiting for someone to notice. And he smiled. Not a big smile, not for show, just a small, quiet smile, because he remembered. And he knew someone else might stand there one day, and someone somewhere would stop. Maybe him, maybe another, but someone, because kindness doesn't disappear. It echoes. It rolls forward like wheels on asphalt, like warmth in cold hands, like one stranger reaching out to another without asking why. Eli Turner never became famous. He didn't need to, but the people he helped, the students, the mothers, the veterans, they remembered. And long after the night he gave up everything for a lost old woman on the side of the road, he realized he hadn't lost a thing. He had found his place, and for the rest of his life, he never stopped pedaling toward people who needed someone to stop. In our darkest moments, kindness still finds a way, often in the quietest places. Not everyone who helps wants recognition. Some just need to know that today, someone isn't going hungry. And sometimes, that alone is enough to change a life. You may forget the story, but if no one retells it, history stays silent forever. Subscribe to Grateful Stories, where justice is honored, kindness is remembered, and no act of quiet heroism is ever lost.